Act like we're just friends tonight. My ex will be there, she instructed. Okay, I said. At the party, her best friend asked what was wrong. I told her we were just friends now. She said, about time. You deserve better. We talked for hours, then left together. Next morning, she showed up at my door crying. Her ex wasn't interested. Her best friend answered the door. In my shirt. Hey viewers, before we move on to the video, please make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button if you want to see more stories like this. Thanks. The espresso machine hissed its final breath, filling the apartment with the rich, bitter scent of dark roast. I poured the shot into the 2 ceramic mugs my sister had given us for our anniversary. His and his, they read, a joke that had made Sarah laugh for a week. Now, the joke felt like it was on me. I carried the mugs to the bedroom, where the real performance was already underway. Sarah was stationed in front of the full-length mirror, a critic assessing her own masterpiece. She held 2 dresses against her body, a little black one and a slinky red number I'd never seen before. The black is safe, elegant, she mused to her reflection. But the red says something. What does it say? I asked, offering her the mug. She took it without looking at me, her eyes still locked on her own image. It says, I'm not trying, but I still win. I took a sip of my coffee, the heat a grounding sensation against my suddenly cold fingertips. We were going to our friend Liam's birthday party. It was a casual, backyard thing. I was in dark jeans and a simple button-down. Sarah was preparing for the Met Gala. You know Liam's parties, I said. It'll be burgers and beer pong. You might be overdressed for the winner's circle. She finally turned, a flicker of annoyance in her expertly lined eyes. It's not about the party, Alex. It's about presence. I should have known then. I should have sensed the shift in the air, the specific, targeted energy she was cultivating. But after 3 years, you get used to the minor mysteries of your partner. I wrote it off as Sarah being Sarah. It was when she started applying a second coat of mascara, her movements sharp and precise, that she broke the silence. Her tone was casual, the way you'd remind someone to take out the trash. So listen, I just saw on Instagram. Jake is going to be at Liam's tonight. The name landed in the room like a lead weight. Jake, her ex, the one from before me. The creative genius, musician whose toxicity she'd recounted to me 100 times, usually when she needed to contrast how stable and safe I was. I paused, my watch strap half fastened. Okay, I thought you said he was a narcissistic man-child who couldn't commit to a pizza order, let alone a relationship. She waved a hand, dismissing the entire history she'd built for me. He is. That's not the point. She met my eyes in the mirror, her gaze cool and practical. The point is, I don't want it to be awkward. So, just act like we're just friends tonight. The words didn't compute at first. They were so absurd, so insulting, that my brain simply rejected them. I felt my entire body go still. The hum of the city outside our 6th-floor window seemed to vanish, replaced by a high-pitched silence in my ears. Just friends. Act like the 3 years we'd spent together. The vacations, the lazy Sundays, the nights I held her while she cried about work, the future we were supposedly building, didn't exist. Act like the ring I'd been looking at online was a fantasy. Act like I was just some guy she knew. I turned fully to face her. She was still looking at me in the mirror, waiting for my compliance. Just friends, I repeated, my voice flat. It wasn't a question. It was me tasting the words, feeling their bitter shape. Yeah, she said, turning back to the mirror to apply a bold red lipstick, the final piece of her armor. It'll be less messy. You understand, right? She blotted her lips with a tissue. Don't be clingy. Clingy. The word was a masterstroke. It reframed any potential hurt or disagreement on my part as a character flaw. It painted her request as reasonable and my natural reaction as pathetic. I looked at her, really looked at her. I saw the woman I loved, but for the first time, I saw her through a clear, cold lens. This wasn't a request born of social anxiety. This was a strategic calculation. I was a prop in her play to make Jake jealous, to show him the stable, handsome man she'd upgraded to, while simultaneously ensuring I didn't get in the way of whatever chaotic energy still crackled between them. The anger came, a hot, sharp spike, but it was immediately smothered by a profound and chilling clarity. Arguing would be pointless. It would make me clingy. It would be playing a game I never agreed to, by rules I didn't respect. The fight drained out of me, replaced by a serene, absolute detachment. I finished fastening my watch. I looked at my own reflection in the mirror, standing just behind her. Our eyes met in the glass. Okay, I said. The word was simple. Final. It wasn't acquiescence. It was a door closing. She smiled, a bright, victorious flash of teeth. Great. I knew you'd get it. She spun around, gave me a quick, perfunctory kiss on the cheek, careful not to smudge her lipstick. You're the best, Alex. She grabbed the red dress and headed for the bathroom to change, already humming a tune I didn't recognize. I stood there, alone in the bedroom. I picked up my coffee mug and drained it. The espresso was cold now. I looked at the two mugs on the dresser. His and his. I picked up hers, carried it to the kitchen, and poured the contents down the sink. The doorbell rang. That would be Maya, Sarah's best friend, here to ride with us. The witness. I walked to the door, my movements automatic, my mind 1,000 miles away, already at the party, already playing the part of the just friend, and already planning my exit from a role I never should have been cast in. The party was in full, deafening swing. Bodies pulsed in the dim light of Liam's basement, a kaleidoscope of forced laughter and shouted conversations over a bass line that felt like a second heartbeat. I stood near a makeshift bar, a folding table laden with liquor bottles and melting ice, and nursed a beer I had no intention of finishing. I was a ghost at the feast, and it was a strangely peaceful feeling. My role was simple. Be present, be pleasant, be a friend. So I was. I'd wished Liam a happy birthday, chatted with a few work acquaintances about nothing consequential, and now I was observing the main event. The main event was Sarah. She was a flame in that red dress, and Jake was a moth she was desperately trying to lure into her fire. I watched her from across the room. She'd accidentally brush past him, laugh a little too loudly at something in his vicinity, tilt her head in that way she knew showed off her neck. She was performing a one-woman play called I'm So Incredibly Happy and Available. And Jake was bored. He'd give her a polite, distracted smile, nod, then turn back to his group of friends, a guy with a guitar slung over his back hanging on his every word. He wasn't playing the game. He wasn't even on the same field. A small, cold part of me, the part that had clicked into place when I said, okay, felt a flicker of satisfaction. Her entire strategy, the dress, the makeup, the humiliation of her own boyfriend, was failing spectacularly. You look like you'd rather be getting a root canal. The voice, warm and laced with familiar amusement, came from my side. I turned to see Maya leaning against the table, holding a red Solo cup. She was Sarah's best friend, but she'd always felt different. Softer. She watched the world with a quiet perceptiveness that Sarah lacked entirely. I offered her a faint smile. Root canal might be more fun. At least they give you drugs for that. What's wrong? She asked, her brow furrowing with genuine concern. You've been hovering by this punch bowl like it's your life's calling. I took a slow sip of my beer, my eyes drifting back towards Sarah's performance. The numbness was my shield. I could tell the truth because I no longer cared about the consequences. Nothing's wrong, I said, my voice even. Just respecting boundaries. Chloe and I are just friends now. The change in Maya was instantaneous. Her playful demeanor vanished. She stared at me, her eyes searching mine for a hint of irony, of pain, of anything. Finding only a calm, resigned truth, her expression shifted. Understanding dawned, followed by a flash of anger she quickly suppressed, replaced by something that looked an awful lot like admiration. About time, she said, her voice low and firm. I blinked. What? I said, it's about time. She took a step closer, her voice dropping so only I could hear it beneath the thrum of the music. You deserve better than being her emotional support animal, Alex. You deserve someone who doesn't make you feel like a secret. Or a prop. It was like she'd reached inside my chest and put words to the cold, hard thing that had been growing there since this afternoon. Emotional support animal. Prop. They were perfect, brutal descriptions of the role I'd been playing. The validation wasn't comforting, it was electrifying. Someone else saw it. Someone from her camp saw it. The noisy party faded into a dull roar. The world shrank to this small space by the punch bowl. She told me it would be less messy, I said, almost to myself. Maya let out a short, derisive laugh. Less messy for her. She wanted a free pass to flirt with Jake without the guilt of having a boyfriend glaring at her. She used you as a human shield. We stood in silence for a moment, watching the finale of Sarah's play. She had finally cornered Jake near the stairs. We saw her put a hand on his arm, saw him gently but firmly remove it, say a few words, and walk away, leaving her standing alone, the vibrant red of her dress suddenly looking desperate and foolish. The spell was broken. The strategy had failed. I turned my back on the scene, giving Maya my full attention. "So, how's your life? What's new outside of all this?" She smiled, a real, relieved smile. "It's good. Work is crazy. I'm thinking of adopting a cat, but I'm afraid I'll turn into a stereotype." We started talking. Really talking. Not the polite, surface-level chatter you make at a party, but the kind of conversation you have when you realize the person across from you actually sees you. We talked about our stupid bosses, our childhood dreams, the books we loved, the existential dread of modern life. We laughed. I realized I hadn't genuinely laughed in months. Hours slipped away. The party began to thin out. At one point, I saw Sarah slumped on a couch by herself, staring into her phone, the picture of dejection. I felt nothing. She was a background character in my story now. Maya glanced at the time on her phone. "I think I'm done here. I was going to call an Uber." "I can give you a ride," I said without hesitation. The thought of staying a second longer was unbearable. The thought of her leaving was worse. "Yeah," she said, her eyes holding mine. "I'd like that." We didn't say goodbye to anyone. We just walked out, the cool night air of baptism after the stale heat of the party. We didn't talk on the walk to my car, but the silence was comfortable, charged with a new, unspoken understanding. As I pulled out of the parking spot, my headlights swept across the front of the house. And there, standing on the porch, having clearly just come out looking for us, was Sarah. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with shock and a dawning, horrible comprehension. She saw me in the driver's seat. She saw Maya in the passenger seat. She saw us leaving together. Our eyes met for a split second in the rearview mirror. I didn't slow down. I didn't wave. I just drove, leaving her standing alone in the wake of my taillights. The full weight of her less messy plan finally, irrevocably, crashing down around her. The morning light streamed into my apartment, clean and bright, washing away the residual grime of the previous night. The silence was a balm. No tension, no performance reviews, no walking on eggshells. Just peace. I was at the stove, scrambling eggs. Maya was sitting at my kitchen island, her hands wrapped around a mug of coffee. She was still wearing my t-shirt, a faded gray one with a band logo from a lifetime ago. On her, it looked like a declaration. We weren't talking much, just existing in the same quiet space. The easy intimacy from the car ride home had settled into something deeper, something solid. We'd talked until 3 a.m., about everything and nothing, and when she'd fallen asleep on my couch, I'd covered her with a blanket and felt a protectiveness I hadn't felt in years. The doorbell rang. It was an ugly, intrusive sound. Maya and I exchanged a single, knowing look. There was no question who it was. The world we'd left behind was at the door, and it was demanding to be let back in. The bell rang again, followed by a frantic knocking, not a polite tap, but the panicked hammering of someone who believed their emergency was yours to solve. I turned off the stove. I felt a surreal calm. This wasn't a confrontation, it was a formality. "You don't have to answer it," Maya said softly, but her eyes said she knew I did. For closure. For the final period at the end of this sentence. "It's okay," I said. I walked to the door and opened it. Sarah stood on the welcome mat, a bitter irony. She was a wreck. The masterpiece from last night was now a smeared, puffy-eyed tragedy. Her expensive red dress was wrinkled, her makeup was a war zone under her eyes, and her hair was a chaotic mess. She looked like she'd been crying for 6 hours straight. She probably had. "Alex, thank God," she choked out, her voice raw. She moved to step inside, but I didn't budge from the doorway. It was a disaster. A complete and utter disaster. Jake, he was with someone else. He completely ignored me. He looked right through me like I was nothing. She was so wrapped up in her own story, she hadn't yet processed the scene in front of her. She was still performing her victimhood for an audience she assumed was captivated. "I was so humiliated," she sobbed, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. I just need to," she stopped. Her eyes, bleary and red-rimmed, finally shifted past me into the apartment. They landed on Maya, who had walked up to stand a few feet behind me, a silent pillar of support. Sarah's jaw went slack. The tears stopped, frozen by sheer, uncomprehending shock. Maya. Her voice was a whisper, thin and brittle. What are you doing here? Her eyes dragged down, taking in the scene. Maya's bare legs, the casual way she stood in my space, and finally, the garment that broke her reality. Why are you wearing his? Maya didn't flinch. She didn't look away. She took a slow, deliberate sip of her coffee, her gaze steady on her former best friend. He wasn't interested, huh? Maya said, her voice dangerously calm. Funny how that feels. The words were a bucket of ice water. Sarah's shock shattered, and what surfaced was pure, unfiltered rage. Her face contorted, the pretty mask she always wore finally cracking to show the ugliness beneath. You did this, she screeched, her finger jabbing accusingly at me, then at Maya. Her voice echoed in the hallway. You planned this. You planned this to humiliate me. You slept with my best friend? How could you, Maya? He's my boyfriend. The hypocrisy was so vast, so breathtaking, it was almost beautiful. I didn't feel anger. I felt anthropological curiosity. My voice, when I spoke, was calm. Flat. The voice of a customer service rep closing a ticket. You told me to act like we were just friends. I was just following your instructions. She stared at me, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. And as of last night, I continued, that's all we are. It seems you were the only one who didn't get the memo. You don't mean that, she wailed, the anger melting back into desperate, messy tears. This is just you being hurt. We can fix this. I made a mistake, Alex. I was stupid. She was begging now, but it wasn't for me. It was for the stability she'd set on fire. It was for the provider plan she'd canceled herself. Maya spoke again, her voice softer now, but no less final. There's nothing to fix, Chloe. You broke it. He's just not interested in your version of the pieces anymore. The use of her full name, Chloe, was the final nail. It was no longer friend to friend. It was person to stranger. Sarah looked from Maya's resolved face to my indifferent one. She saw the two of us, a united front. She saw the eggs cooling on the stove, the 2 coffee mugs, the domestic mourning she had thrown away for a fantasy. The full, devastating weight of her karma settled on her shoulders. The last of her composure evaporated. You think you're so much better now? She spat, her voice venomous. You're a traitor and he's a pathetic, boring loser. You deserve each other. I didn't smile. I didn't react. I just looked at her, this stranger having a meltdown on my doorstep. Good luck, Sarah, I said, and I closed the door. The click of the lock was a quiet, definitive sound. The end of an era. The beginning of everything else. I turned around. Maya was still there, watching me, a quiet understanding in her eyes. The screaming from the other side of the door faded, replaced by the sound of retreating, stumbling footsteps. You okay? She asked. I looked at her, standing in my kitchen, in my shirt, in my life. I felt the quiet peace of the morning return, deeper and more profound than before. Yeah, I said, and for the first time in a very long time, I'm in it completely. I am. I walked back to the stove, turned the burner back on, and started finishing the eggs. The ghost was gone. The future was waiting, and it was already here, drinking my coffee and looking at me like I was the only person in the world. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. What do you think about this story? Share it in the comments.